Okay, let's go ahead and move in here for the GOP. As you said, never underestimate the GOP's ability in order to shoot itself in the foot. There's been a little squabble, which I find very, very interesting, around the future of the Republican Party. Kind of try to track these 2024 trends and all of that. And the one you might have seen in cable news, which actually is worth delving a little bit into, is the current spat between Chris Christie and Donald Trump. So you guys will recall, Chris Christie was the first establishment Republican, or sorry, the second, I believe, after Jeff Sessions, when he dropped out of the Republican primary in 2016 and shocked America whenever he endorsed Trump. I mean, it was truly like a speechless moment for a lot of people.
Blew up Marco Rubio on his way out.
Blew up Marco Rubio. Suicide bombed Marco Rubio on his way out. Then gets nuked in the New Hampshire primary. And then what? He endorses Donald Trump. It's a landmark moment. Ultimately, it doesn't end up working out for him. Trump kind of emasculates him, even in the video whenever Christie endorsed him. Christie never ended up getting a high-profile position within the Trump administration. I think he wanted to be Attorney General, and Trump would just never give it to him.
Kushner had bad blood. He killed that, yeah.
He killed the transition. This is all ancient history at this point. But Christie backed him. He prepped him for the debate. Remember that? Remember he even got COVID prepping Trump.
Died.
He nearly died, yeah. He actually writes about that in his book. But Christie has decided that he wants to even possibly challenge Trump for the 2024 nomination. I'll say at the top, I don't think any of this has a chance in hell to work out. But that being said, the spat itself is interesting. So we'll put this on the screen. What happened is that Chris Christie gave a speech and basically said, look, we need to move on from this election fraud stuff. Trump went ahead and blasted him in a statement saying that we cannot move past the election fraud. Winning campaigns are campaigns that look forward and not backwards, is what Christie had originally said at the Republican Jewish Coalition meeting in Las Vegas on Sunday. What I found interesting is that even at that meeting, there was silence whenever he made that. There was a lot of discomfort among some of the attendees because they knew that it was a direct shot against Trump himself. Trump obviously took notice of that. He said Chris Christie, who made a speech in Las Vegas, was massacred by his statements. The Republicans have to move on. Everybody remembers Christie left New Jersey with a less than 9% approval rating, a record low, and they don't want to hear any of this from him. Christie then responds in an Axios interview which just aired, which again I found very interesting. Let's take a listen.
Elections for Republicans need to be about the future, not the grievances of the past. Donald Trump put out a statement saying you've gotten absolutely massacred.
Yeah, well, look, I've made the conscious decision, Mike, that I want to spend my time combating the policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and trying to help Republicans win governorships and the House and the Senate in 2022. This is not an argument that I'll walk away from.
And then he went for it. He said, everybody remembers that Chris left New Jersey with a less than 9% approval rating. What do you make of him saying you had a less than 9% approval rating?
Look, I'm not going to get into a back and forth with Donald Trump, but what I will say is this. When I ran for re-election in 2013, I got 60% of the vote. When he ran for re-election, he lost to Joe Biden. I'm happy to have that comparison stand up because that's the one that really matters.
Well, a little bit of a parting shot there from Chris Christie. And again, it's difficult to parse this one, Krystal. I mean, he did supplicate himself before Trump for 5 straight years. And it's after he loses, then he's willing to call him out. But the fact is, Chris Christie was one of the most popular GOP politicians in this country for years. Everybody thinks he missed a shot by not running against Obama back in 2012. And then in the post-Trump age, he very much sees the election fraud stuff, kind of like I do as well, as just an absolute noose around the neck of the party, because it's one of those things where, well, look, will the Republicans win just because of discontent back in 2022? Absolutely. But when you bring this back to the fore, and you really are going to convince your entire base that the election was stolen, and not just that, I mean, you and I have seen this repeatedly, which is attempts by Republican politicians to say, yeah, but what he really meant is that big tech and the media were, I'm like, no, he doesn't mean that. What he
doesn't mean
means,
any of that.
And what he means, and what the people who believe him say, is that the Dominion Venezuelans literally used bamboo ballots from China to steal the election. They believe that. And look, for the people who believe it, they trust him a lot. I wish it was otherwise, but that's just the truth. And I'm not going to patronize them by saying, no, what they really mean is this. I know what they mean. They're incorrect, and it's okay. Hope they would listen to the show. But really what it is that you can see how that level of noxiousness, that just leads people to either exit the electoral system or just vote against you because they can't stand that stuff. It will remain a huge problem for the Republicans that so many people in the Beltway just want to look past. And just because they do well in 2022 based upon an oppositional message does not mean that you can run affirmatively on a case that the election was completely stolen and that you will win again. It has dangerous consequences both for your own chances, as we saw in Georgia, whenever people were like, Republicans were like, oh, well, what's the point? Why should I even come out
That's a great point.
and vote? We have seen that repeatedly. Trump himself came forward and was trying to pull the same stuff possibly in Virginia, if the results went the other way. These are not good results for your actual own base. And if you make it the centerpiece, as Trump himself is making this the defining issue of his campaign and of loyalty to him, whether you think the election was stolen or not, well, it's just going to create an albatross around your neck going forward. So, it's just one of these things where Christie is not the right messenger, but he is directionally correct that you cannot be the person who makes this the only defining thing about what makes you a Republican. And I'm not saying that. Donald Trump, the leader of the Republican Party, is saying that.
Yeah.
If you don't agree with that, then that's fine, but that doesn't actually make you a Republican. And that's part of the problem, which is that if that's all there is, then, it's going to be very difficult to win national elections in the future.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of electoral calculus, if Christie actually wants to win a Republican nomination, this is not going to work out.
It's obviously not going to work.
Is he correct that this is a major problem for the Republican Party? I think we've had proof of that over the past couple years. And you pointed to it. When Trump was very involved and very visible, they went on to lose 2 seats in Georgia that they had no business losing. I remember at the time when we saw on election night that those 2 were going to a runoff, forget about it.
Yeah, I was like,
because the history in Georgia, first of all, Democrats have long struggled to win the state, number one. Number two, the history in Georgia is in these runoff elections, Republicans always routinely outperform whatever they did in the general election in November. That was the longstanding trend. It took a whole onslaught of Trump and his whole tribe of crazy people.
Lynn Wood.
Well, yeah, and all those people
TBT.
whose names I want to, consign to the dustbin of my memory. All of them had to come together to get the GOP to lose those very winnable seats and hand control of the Senate over to the Democrats. In California, you saw how because Larry Elder was more closely tied to Trumpism, in the end, there was a huge wave for Democrats ultimately that led Gavin Newsom to easily survive what was truly perilous waters for him at one point. In contrast, in Virginia, Trump stayed away. He stayed quiet. Youngkin was able to walk that very narrow line of not pissing off the Trump base so much that they wouldn't vote for him, but not really affirming the president, just sort of dog whistling towards the, we're worried about election security, et cetera, but not enough to turn off independent voters. I think if Trump had showed up in the state of Virginia, I think Youngkin,
I also think he would have lost.
I think he would have lost. If he had been more visible even, one of the biggest favors that's been done for the Republican Party and for Trump and his personal favorability with the country at this point is that all the social media giants kicked him off the platform.
Getting deplatformed is the best thing that ever happened to him.
It totally is. And it's the best thing that's happened in the Republican Party. Because he's so much quieter, and so people kind of forget how insane and delusional, obnoxious, and just divisive and toxic he is to the country.
Right.
They've sort of forgotten, some of the edge has been taken off of that. But yeah, when you get to 2024, if he's the GOP nominee, that's all going to be front and center again. Of course, on the other hand, Democrats are going to run either Joe Biden's carcass, Kamala Harris, or Pete Buttigieg. And so they're equally screwed. So that's kind of where things stand right now.
Yes, and just to give you guys an update how this all works out. Oh, I did not mention this. Chris Christie actually even has mentioned he might run even if Trump runs again. So put that tweet on the screen, in which he said that, following the path of baseless claims is not going to work, and that he would be a productive voice for the party going forward, even if Trump does run again. But to give you an idea of how this is all manifesting on a policy level, we mentioned this in our last show, put this Trump statement up there on the screen. He is now saying that he is willing to field primary challengers against the House Republicans who voted for the infrastructure bill and the Bannon contempt and impeachment charge, including Mace, McKinley, and Smith there in the House of Representatives. Just amazing, which is that, yeah, if you voted for an infrastructure bill, especially these Northeastern Republicans, which has a 70% approval rating amongst Republicans, in their district, then you're not a real Republican. Yeah, that's really going to work out well for democracy.
Which is that similar infrastructure bill that was proposed under Trump.
Exactly. And it's like if you're going to set the standard that no dollar is legitimate if you vote to spend for it under a Democrat, then you're just a complete moron and you just destroyed the U.S. Congress, which is what the Tea Party did and what many of these people said that they were moving on from. But, what goes around comes around, and it's all just a cynical culture war.
Do you think that Christie is just posturing for like a more highly paid media gig or to sell books? Or?
He's a millionaire already. He's a multi-millionaire. I think his wife works on Wall Street.
It's never enough for them. They always want more.
Maybe you're right. I don't know. I think he likes being relevant. I think he likes being on TV. I think that he probably legitimately believes that in his mind, he's probably like, I'm the one who endorsed Trump from the beginning, so it's most legitimate for me. I had a connection to the Republican base for years, which is true. He's a very high name ID, all of that. But look, it's a farce. He failed in the 2016 campaign. He would utterly, fall on his face in a Republican campaign in 2024. That being said, I do think The Voice, it's not bad. I think it is important for people to hear this stuff.
In a lot of ways, Trump took his lane. Because
he was the bombastic,
he was the brash asshole, and then Trump was more of a brash asshole, And Christie kind of looked small next to Trump in the debate stage. He wasn't as big of a personality as Trump ultimately was. Because remember, Christie made his name yelling at teachers at town halls. Yes. That was his thing. But look, his politics to me are terrible. But I always thought he was very politically talented.
Oh, he was, and he was actually a smart guy. I've seen him speak back in 2015, 2014, and more. I remember went to a conference once where he was at. I was blown away.
He's very talented.
His grasp of the policy details and more. Look, I'm a nerd. That stuff doesn't actually resonate with people.
Yeah,
but I remember
thinking he's got the charisma to back it up.
Exactly.
Like when he took out Marco Rubio.
Exactly right.
Like I said, I would watch that that moment on repeat all day, every day, because he just thoroughly exposed that man in that moment.
Yes.
He really exposed him for being extraordinarily shallow, overly prepped by his consultants, had his talking point, and he couldn't do anything other than repeat his talking points. And Christie called him out on that. So if it wasn't for I think if Christie had run back in 2012,
I think he might have
when
won,
there was
honestly.
a whole effort from GOP elites to recruit him in, and a lot of money was behind him, he decided to take a pass. I think if Christie ends up being the Republican nominee instead of Romney, I think he had a better shot at winning
he definitely
that matchup against Obama, because Romney was just such a character. He's so awkward, all of his weird sayings that the trees are the right height and binders full, all that stuff. Christie was a more formidable opponent, but he just missed his window. Now the party is Trump's, and that's that.
Yeah, that's right. And Christie was, in many ways, he was a lot more liberal on a lot of the culture war politics, kind of in the same way that Trump was. He was bombastic, anti-political correctness in a very New Jersey type way, foreshadowing the Trump wave.
Yeah.
He had a high number of Hispanic voters who backed him in the state of New Jersey. He was quite a competent governor. From a basic competence standpoint, and he's actually a pretty smart guy. He really did have all of it going for him, but I do think that he just nuked his chances by tying himself to Trump and being embarrassed on the national stage now for 5 years. That being said, it's an interesting development. We'll continue to track it.
Yep, the media's gonna love him. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut. Our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions. All that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.